Greetings to all you Music Compound members, followers, and friends. I'd like to introduce myself right away. My name is Paul Luther. I'm a guitar and ukulele instructor in the Music Compound, and I'm going to give a little bit of a talk and a demonstration and a little bit of hands-on education about fingerstyle guitar in general and the broad aspects of that. But first I'll give you a little bit about my teaching history. I grew up in England, of course, you can tell from my accent, and for those who didn't know already. I worked in the school system in England for a company called Scamps, which is Southern Counties Music and Publishing Services. And they were an awesome company. They wrote their own syllabus, and they got me used to actually educating within bigger groups within the school system. And then I got married to my sweetheart and moved to the United States in 2007, and I started working for a cute little mom and pop type music store which did lessons up in Indiana called Front Porch Music. They were great. And then 2013 we moved down to Florida, and I was waiting for my kids to get out of the dental appointment one time, and I was flipping through a magazine and I saw this cute little advert with awesome colors, red, white, and black, and it was these guys advertising. So I gave them a call and said, I'm looking for teaching work, and they were super nice. Jenny said right away, yeah, come down, come meet me, and before you know it, she hired me as one of the instructors. So I've been there 4 or 5 years. Oh my gosh, I guess I'm not very good at keeping track of time, but Music Compound, I got to give them a shout out. They are the best music school I've ever come across. Whether I've been personally involved with a music school or just through schools I've heard about, they are like music education on steroids. It's like 3D Technicolor music education. They offer so much to their members, so many performance opportunities and the like, and I'm very grateful to Jenny and everybody there for doing what they're doing. Let me talk a little bit about my playing history. So my playing history, I took classical guitar lessons at the age of 7 in England. I grew up in a mid-sized town called Salisbury, and we didn't have a lot of choice, of course, back then. There was one guitar teacher in town, and he taught classical lessons. So it was very strict and by the book. It was, exercises, it was scales, it was sight reading, it was pure classical guitar. I enjoyed it, but it was a struggle. Practicing wasn't easy. But I stuck with it, and by the time I got to the age of 12 or 13, I started listening to more music. And then I get into more modern styles. I bought my first electric guitar when I was 13. So I was listening to more and more music, and I started to learn by ear. But what that did, it gave me a passion more to go back to classical guitar, because it opened up the door and it made everything I learned on classical guitar and all the sight reading make more sense in context of what I'm hearing in music, in pop music and everything else I was listening to. And from that day on, I kept practicing classical guitar into my teens, and it was something that my other fellow musician friends couldn't really do. They didn't really play with their fingers. They couldn't use fingerstyle playing. So I'm just super glad I stuck with it, and obviously a lot of my living is made from playing fingerstyle, whether it's classical or modern style fingerstyle today, so I'm awfully glad that I just kept that going. So I'm going to demonstrate a few styles in a minute and show you how versatile the fingerstyle technique of guitar playing is. So the term fingerstyle obviously refers to not the left hand, because obviously you use your left hand whether you're using a pick or not. It refers to the right hand, of course, for plucking or strumming with your fingers as opposed to a pick. Okay, so obviously the one thing to get straight right away there. The most obvious use for fingerstyle would be in just pure instrumental music, and the most obvious example of that would be to just be a pure classical guitarist, which is an awesome thing. There's so many great classical guitarists out there. The grandfather or the daddy, or depending on your generation, of the classical guitar would have to be Andres Segovia. He really popularized the instrument in the early 1900s and brought it into the public realm in a major, major way. So nylon string guitar is usually associated with classical guitar and with fingerstyle music, But there are other examples. This is obviously a nylon string guitar here, as you can see. Predominantly nylon strings, apart from the ones that are wound in steel. But you can also use fingerstyle for different styles of music other than classical. And you can use it on steel string guitar. You can use it on electric guitar as well. It can be useful in very many ways, which I'm going to demonstrate a little bit later on. Okay, so let's talk about the right hand. So each of the digits here, there's 5. We take away the pinky. There's very few guitarists that will use the pinky. Some super advanced classical pieces may require that, but we're just going to assume we don't use the pinky because generally speaking, I never use the pinky, to be fair. So we've got these 4 digits to deal with here. In traditional classical guitar, they're designated a letter for each one. So if you're sight reading a piece of music and they want you to use your fingers in a certain way, they will use those letters to indicate which direction they want you to use your fingers in. So now the letters, they come from, obviously, in, I believe, probably Latin terminology here. So the letters themselves, this guy here is P, this is I, this is M, and this is A. So that stands for, P is for pulgar, which is the thumb, of course. I is indice, index finger. M is medio, middle finger. And A is annular, the ring finger. So pulgar, indice, medio, and annular. See, I'm reading my notes there because what I do with my students is that I designate a different word for them to help them remember. Because all they need to remember really is just P-I-M-A. They don't need to remember those fancy Latin words. So we use the little rhyme with my younger students. Pigs in muddy Africa. P-I-M-A. Pigs in muddy Africa. I'm sure you could come up with your own at home. So that indicates which fingers you're going to use to create a fingerstyle pattern on the guitar strings. Okay, it's pretty useful to have fingernails as well when you're playing guitar. Unfortunately, with nail salons closed for obvious reasons right now, mine are in a complete state right now. I kept them pretty good for a while, and I sadly resorted to using super glue to just make sure they didn't fly off, knowing that I had this video to make, and last night one of them actually flew off. So I am kind of going to be operating on 75% power, because my index finger, the nail there's not much nail left there. Obviously I'm talking about using fake nails here. I use acrylic nails because they strengthen your fingers up. They sound great, they're really tough on the strings, and they feel great to play with. Some people may put finger picks on their fingers, which you've probably seen, but that's usually for more kind of folk music. And people may play a banjo like that with like those metal picks on their fingers, but that's something I really can't do myself. I can't rely on my real nails because they break so easily. Okay, so that's enough about fingernails. So hopefully mine will work, so I apologize in advance if they don't play quite as well as they usually do. So I'll give you a little example here of a classical piece. This is the one that I first managed to master, which made me fall in love with classical fingerstyle guitar. It's the Spanish ballad, traditional Spanish ballad. Okay, so for those of you who have a guitar at home with them, or they can grab one real quick, I'll show you kind of technically what I'm doing here. So I'm holding down a note on the 7th fret of the thin string, the bottom E string there, and I'm working with my fingers, I'm working my way backwards. I'm using the A finger on the thin string, the middle finger on the B string, and the index finger on the G. So if you have a guitar in your hand, hold that 7th fret down with your left hand and just kind of follow the pattern I'm doing. So it's A, M, I, A, M. I'm referring obviously to the finger names. And I'm going to add the thumb on the first beat of each group of 3 notes. So 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to skip the thumb again. And I'm going to bring the thumb in again. So we're going to do 3 groups of 3 with the thumb on the first of each group. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And obviously the melody moves around. It's a very simple melody. It goes from the 7th fret to the 5th, to the 3rd, to the 2nd, and then it makes its way back up. 3rd fret, 7th, 3rd fret, 7th, and up to the 12th fret. So we'll try that again. So start on the 7th fret, 7, 7, 7, 7, 5, 3, 3, 2, open, open, 3, 7, and then you right up on the 12th fret, and then things get a little more complicated with bar chords, so we'll just leave it at that for now. But if you have a guitar in your hand, if you can make that finger roll, starting on the thin string, going backwards, that's a lot harder to do than going the other way than to use the index finger first. That's the more natural way when you go in the order of the index first. So if you can get that finger roll coming backwards, then you stand a chance of becoming a really good fingerstyle guitar player. And then adding the thumb gives you that bass note as well. So you can even just practice that on open strings like so. Or you can try the little melody. You can even make up your own little melody. It doesn't have to be this pattern, but I guarantee anyone who plays a little bit of guitar would be able to play the first part of the Spanish ballad within half a guitar lesson. And those that are a little more advanced who can play bar chords would be able to play the whole piece within probably a couple of lessons, 2 or 3 lessons. So that's how, I'm going to say easy, but it's not as daunting as you think once you learn a few little finger rolls going this way and maybe going in the opposite direction. Okay, awesome. So the more gigs I did playing out in public, the more I expanded my repertoire. So I'm sticking to just plain instrumental music that I would be doing for, let's say, dining music at country clubs. I started to learn everything from just old traditional standards as a fingerstyle piece, or even some unexpected, more popular things, even some modern things you would never expect to be done in this style. A lot of things can work. I'll give you a couple of little examples. My favorite band of all time, the Beatles. I'm going to do a couple little bits here. We're going to do Yesterday. Basically, it sounds like a classical piece, but I'm incorporating the melody of the song so it's recognizable in amongst the chords and using my right hand techniques here. Going into Let It Be now. Play a nice standard now, do a little bit of Over the Rainbow. And then something you wouldn't expect, a little bit of Bohemian Rhapsody. I've got nothing against classical guitar. I love playing classical music still, absolutely. But when you're playing for 2-3 hours, it's nice to mix in songs that people know. So if you're interested in taking fingerstyle lessons, don't feel that, oh my gosh, I'm going to be just playing, study after study. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's a lot to be gained, and there's a lot of really pretty sounding pieces. But you can see, you can open up that world to pieces of music you wouldn't expect, played in that nice, relaxing way, using fingerstyle techniques that you would learn. When I choose the pieces that I'm going to interpret in this way, there's so many factors, because the guitar is quite limited compared to the piano. There's not as much of a range of octaves. It's a little tricky, so you have to pick a very good key to play it in that's going to work, and you have to choose the right kind of songs. They have to be songs that have interesting enough chord changes, very expressive in the melodies. The melody really needs to move around a lot. So certain modern songs, got nothing against modern songs, but certain songs, think of Ed Sheeran's Shape of You. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. I'm singing terribly here, but you get the idea. It's a very repetitive pattern of melodic. You take away the lyrics from that song. I love the song, by the way. And musically, you play that melody, and it ain't that entertaining for more than about 30 seconds. So it's got to have enough variation in the sections of the songs as well, the chord sequences and the melody, and not to be too repetitive, because when those vocals come out, you want that melody to be able to stand up and to still be a beautiful piece of music on its own without the lyrics. So that's my interpretation of different songs that aren't classical, using the nylon string guitar and my fingerstyle techniques. So if you already play guitar and you use the instrument as an accompaniment to, maybe you're a singer and you use it to play cover songs along with, or if you like to write music using a guitar as your predominant instrument that you write with, then fingerpicking can really open up a whole new world to both those things. If you're using a pick, you can get kind of stuck in a little box of certain rhythmical patterns that you may do with a pick, certain limitations that you're going to come across, like some chord voicings are hard to use when you're using a pick. So if you feel like you're stuck in that box, using fingerpicking as an accompaniment can really help out a lot. So here's a real simple little technique. So I'm going to use just a simple chord sequence of G, D, E minor, and C. Okay, so G, D, E minor, and C, if anyone wants to play along. My IMA, my fingers, index, middle, annular, they're going to stick to the three thin strings, the G, B, E. My thumb's going to move around and just play the correct bass note per chord. So if you're familiar with chords, you know what that correct bass note is. And I'm just going to do the simple picking pattern of P, I, M, A, a couple of times on each chord. So on the G chord, P, I, M, A, P, I, M, A. You get the idea. So I'm going to do it twice, and then I'm going to change to the D chord, and I'm going to change my bass note with my thumb too. P, I, M, A, P, I, M, A. So you get the idea there. Just a real simple running through specific notes of each chord. But this is nothing that you can't do with a pick. You can still do that with a pick. It has a completely different sound, more attack to it. So just individual notes. So you can still do that style with a pick. Personally, I don't think the sound is as nice. It's a little louder. Maybe that's what you might want to go for. But I like the softness and the texture you get from using your fingers. So that's stuff you can do with a pick. There's a lot of stuff when you split notes across strings that are far apart. You cannot do that with a pick, of course. So here's another simple pattern. I'm going to use the same chords, but this time we're going to use the thumb and the index and middle. The index and middle are going to stick to the G and the B string, and the thumb's going to stick on the bass notes of each chord again. So maybe I'll stick with just the G chord to start with. So I'm hitting all three notes with P, I, M on the first beat, and then just the fingers separately, and all together and then separately. So creating a real simple pattern. I'm going to change chords, sticking to that same pattern, just moving the thumb to change the bass note. And it's almost like a piano, what a pianist would do to accompany a song. Dun, dun. You got the bass notes with the left hand going, and then like a simple little chord pattern on top. So that you cannot do with a pick. So fingerstyle is useful for that. You can even do the same kind of thing and kind of split the higher sounding notes up a little bit. See, I'm just splitting those apart instead of playing as a bunch. So another little simple accompaniment you could do to a cover song that you already do, or you're not fed up but you're not happy with just using a pick the whole time. And that obviously opens up the doors if you're writing songs as well, which we'll get to in a minute as well. In fact, let's get to it right now. I mentioned chord voicings. There's certain chord voicings that you're limited to when you're using a pick. Open chord shapes, bar chord shapes. But if you're playing a little 3-note chord voicing and there's certain open strings you don't want to hit, it's very tough to do with a pick. So it's easier to be selective when you're using your fingers. You can avoid those strings that you don't want to hit because maybe the open strings are going to have a bum note there with your little higher chord voicing. So I'm going to play a little piece that I wrote, just a little chord sequence using some just little 3-note chord voicings and using my finger pattern here. So a little ditty that I wrote, and that really opened up a complete song just by writing a chord sequence, finding higher chord voicings, and selecting the specific strings. I couldn't really play, some of those chords would work with a pick, but some of them would sound a little nasty, like that last chord. I'm just hitting the middle strings. If I was strumming, I'd have that opening at the top, making it a little bit of a discordant chord, which may not really suit the piece very much. So fingerstyle guitar is a very powerful tool to open up different realms of accompaniment if you're doing cover songs. But like I said, if you're a writer, songwriter that writes songs on guitar and you want something a little different than just a strummed chord pattern, then finger picking is a great thing to have. I think there's tons of songs that have predominant finger picking patterns that open up the songs. They're very distinct. The song Turn the Lights Down Low, that's got a really cool little simple plucked acoustic guitar pattern. Say You Won't Let Go, that also. And then this song here, this is pretty famous. But I'll play you the guitar riff to this song here, and you'll hear that the melody of the song is actually it's implanted within that guitar part, the finger picking guitar part. So they may have written the guitar part first, and that may have spawned this amazing, huge selling song. So you can actually hear the melody that Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga sing is right there within that finger-picked guitar part. So that would have stood up on its own as just a nice piece of music, but then had the lyrics on top, and with that melody that's within the guitar part, and you've got a killer song right there. I'll give you one other example of something that I've written. I wrote a nice little guitar riff which acted as an instrumental section that would crop up in the song at the beginning, the middle, and then on the play out at the end. But it was a little bit too much to sing over. It was a little bit too busy. So I simplified it where the vocal comes in. I'm not going to sing, but you'll see where I change it to allow space for a vocal. So I came up with like a little guitar picked riff first of all. And then when I get to the bit where the vocal comes in on the verse, I kind of just made a shorter pattern out of those chords. Space for a vocal line. Again. So obviously that riff, that would have been a little busy to sing over. It'd be distracting from the lead vocal. So again, you can use it as a feature, as part of your song, or you can just simplify a little bit and allow some space. Just lay down that chord in a nice way for you to sing over. So when fingerpicking, you are not just limited to the nylon string guitar, of course. I mentioned earlier about the steel string and the electric guitar too. So steel string, yeah, you can play different styles like blues using fingerpicking techniques. Folk music, obviously, is a big one. I'll give you a couple of little examples of how it can be useful. I'm not much of a blues player, but I dabble a little bit. This is a little blues riff that I made up, and without being a finger picker, I wouldn't be able to play the bass line independently of what my little chord melody is doing. I wrote this when I was 14, I think, and I don't think I've forgotten it yet. We'll see. So again, probably a little bit difficult to do with a pick. Also, for folk music, you know, guys like Bob Dylan were doing this. You can use a technique called Travis picking. I'll explain a little bit about Travis picking here. There's a certain pattern that's been used in classic songs like Dust in the Wind. And The Boxer as well by Paul Simon. Essentially what it is, you're moving your thumb between two strings. I'll show you on a D chord here. So we're just going to use P-I-M for this one, okay? So if you want to play along. Your thumb's going to jump between the D string and the G string. And your index is going to stick on the B string. And your M finger, the middle, is going to stick on the thin string. So on beat 1, we're going to use the thumb and the middle finger. The thumb on the D string, and of course the middle string on the middle finger on the thin string. And I'm going to move my thumb across then. Right here, I'm going to move it across, and then I'm going to hit my index finger on the string it's covering, the B string. So let's do that again. 2 together, thumb and middle, thumb across, index. That's part of the Travis pick. And then thumb, middle, thumb across again, index. So 2 together, thumb across, index, thumb, middle, thumb, index. Now, I'm sure there's different variations on Travis picking where you maybe stop a beat early. And obviously you can do that on any chord, but essentially it's just, like I say, thumb and middle finger. And this can be translated to any chord, but D is a little easier because the 4 strings are grouped nice and close together. So those 2 together, move your thumb across, index finger, then back with the thumb, middle, thumb, index. And it's really good because basically your thumb is moving like this constantly. If you break down and take away the higher notes, that's what you're going to hear. And generally it is a faster pattern than that. And just add a Bob Dylan vocal and then you've got a folk song. Alright, awesome. So, those of you that like to watch different guitar players on YouTube, there is a world of phenomenal finger-picking guitarists, the modern breed of guitarists. I'm not sure if I'm correct in who started this, but I would have to say somebody who is definitely a linchpin in projecting modern fingerstyle guitar, instrumental stuff I'm talking about here, would be Tommy Emmanuel. If you've never checked him out, check him out. He's an Australian guy. He puts on a super funny show and he's just incredibly, I'm not worthy, just phenomenal. And he spawned this whole new breed of guitar players. Usually they use steel string guitar. They like to use alternate tunings or drop tunings. They'll put capos in interesting positions. They'll do a lot of this stuff hammering on with their left hand and a lot of percussive stuff with their right hand. And this is not a style that I'm particularly that great at. I will give you one little example of such a guy that came after Tommy Emmanuel, a great player called Antoine Dufour. is a piece called Glimmer of Hope. Really interesting piece. The thick string, the E, is dropped down to an E flat, and you capoing on the 3rd fret, or just the 5 strings though. You're leaving the thick string open, so you've got to capo from this way. So if you play it, it's a C shape, you're essentially playing an E flat with a nice low E flat with it. And he creates a nice this is one small part of his piece. So it's a cracking piece of music. I urge you to check it out. It's called Glimmer of Hope. The whole thing is pretty complicated. That's just a little taster for you though. So I have to mention electric guitar too, because yes, you can use your finger picking techniques on electric guitar. It would be in the minority because most people use the pick for many good reasons, but there's a lot of great players that have used their fingers and got great results using their fingers for electric guitar too. I guess the daddy of that would have to be Chet Atkins. Now he's just a genius player. If you've never heard of Chet Atkins, again, hit YouTube. He had his own TV show back in the 70s where he would get musical guests on and they would jam together, and he's just a phenomenal fingerstyle player. I guess predominantly country, but crosses over a little bit into kind of folk. So again, country is another style. If you're a country player, finger picking is a great thing to have up your sleeve. But Chet Atkins had a worshipper in a guy called Mark Knopfler, who's my favorite electric guitar player of all time. Absolutely love his playing. He plays with just a couple of fingers usually, maybe 2 or 3 fingers. He headed the band Dire Straits, and now he's obviously still playing solo, but he plays with his fingers, and he just blew my mind when I heard his stuff, because, you know, as a classical player, and then I'm suddenly hearing some guy playing these really cool guitar parts using his fingers on electric guitar, and it just sounded so great to me. You can get so much expression out of playing with your fingers, and you can sweep across strings a lot easier than you can with a pick. So his most famous song would have to be The Songs of Swing. So the opening riff for that, again, is great with your fingers. It's a lot harder to get the same results with a pick. And then he does phenomenal solos in there, and when it gets to the end, the climax of the whole solo, he busts into this little rolling pattern, which again is so much easier to do with your fingers. So that's a lot easier to do when you're using your fingers, because you can have one of your digits, your PIMA, per string, as opposed to like constantly going back and forth with a pick, which is a lot more work. So, electric guitarists, fingerstyle playing can also help you out too. So I really hope, for those of you watching this video, it's helped you out, whether you're playing along and you picked up a few things, or if it just opened up your mind to what you can do if you learn how to use PIMA and become a fingerstyle guitarist. So if anyone's interested in learning a little bit more, contact the Music Compound and maybe we can set up some lessons and try and go over some of the stuff that we've been talking about today. Thanks for listening, everybody. Stay healthy,